Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this part 8 edition of ClariTea at AMA Ask Me Anything. This is the 56th episode of the Clarity Chat, and thank you all for supporting this initiative. Um, Now, this is the this is the first time that it so happened that I had to, request my guest to postpone his chat because I didn't really get time to prepare for it. I was on vacation for the last 2 weeks, um, and that's why we had, an Ask Me Anything last week and an Ask Me Anything this week. We didn't get time to prepare, and I don't really want to bring in any guests here without the due preparation, without really bringing out, the powerful case studies and experiences that they have, which only comes out when you do a good preparation and really bring out those powerful stories. So but I believe every cloud has a silver lining. So um, the idea is not to get discouraged by things that are not under your control, and the entire Ask Me Anything sessions are actually making the best out of any adverse situations to get into a direct one-on-one conversation with all of you. By the way, just to share with you, if you saw my LinkedIn post about half an hour back, I'm attending this from my alumni convention. Almost 250 plus alumni of my college are there from Motilal Nehru National Institute of Technology, Prayagraj. And it was really inspiring to hear, our college juniors, much junior actually, building startups which are unicorns, startups like DriveEasy, Unacademy, Dunzo, Tissot Drones, and so on. So I'm really, full of energy right now. I had to actually take a break from those panel discussions which are going on to come and talk to you on this Clarity Chat. So, as we always do in the Ask Me Anything, we will take a few remaining questions from our backlog, but we'll give, of course, priority to the audience like the questions. Yeah, present is more important than the past. So, like always, the platform will remain open for you to come live with me on a chat. If you have a case study to share, if you have a value add coming from Clarity Chat, so just send out a comment mentioning your discussion topic and the fact that you want to come live with me, and we can start off, right? So we will talk real and practical stuff, and let's give relief to Gyan this weekend. So some of the backlog we have that we can cover um, is outsourcing a problem solver or just a change in hands? How can IT help achieving personalization at work? What are typical processes every business must automate, and how vendor organization teams can show individual value add in the eyes of the customer? And of course, balancing these with your questions. So you will get honest answers, case studies, practical approaches, but no gyan. But before I go ahead, I would request our audience to share their name and where you're joining from in the comment box on LinkedIn or YouTube. And I do see a comment here from Kapil. Hey, Kapil, good evening. Thanks for joining. And everyone else, please um, just ping where you're joining from and your name. Okay, so let's begin, with some of the unanswered questions from previous episodes of Clarity Chat. The first question is outsourcing a problem solver or just a change in hands? Okay, so the answer comes in multiple flavors, and with almost 40 years that outsourcing has been there. So I think the video that I show before every Clarity Chat session. Um, Clarity is one of the most complex functions. I can sort of say that it is the most complex function, and therefore, it's a hot potato for everyone. So where it probably started is, where people came and sold you that, hey, you can't manage it yourself. It's very complex, and and we can do it for you. The seemingly advantages of outsourcing that are typically sold to you are that we will create a process driven operating model, we will bring efficiencies, SLAs, and a modern way of working. But we all know why this question is there from Pankaj uh, is primarily because many of those promises are unfulfilled, and many of those promises are just like a rainbow out there, uh, which you never reach. So um, now the question then should be that how do we how do we make outsourcing work? Okay. Now let's understand. In fact, this is one question where which we discussed quite a bit in detail with in our Clarity Chat with Hiren Savla, where they achieved exponential growth with a capable outsourcing provider and a capable outsourcing model. Maybe I think growing their number of offices some 5 times over X years and all that. So beyond just a change in hands, which it typically becomes, there are a few things that we need to do, and I think the biggest one of them is to create a trusted partnership. Typically, when we have these one-off work with vendors or partners, uh, there's a lot of distrust and a lot of oversight on what they are doing, what they're not doing, etc. We need to build trust, and all the mechanisms have to be towards that, right? It cannot just be a discussion on you met this SLA and you didn't meet this SLA. We have to understand the first thing that no one is perfect. Even your outsourcing partner is not perfect. Probably they have some freshers out there under some lead. That lead also may not be a mature lead, just because there's so much of dearth of capable people out there. So um, the first thing, acknowledge that your partner is not perfect, and therefore you need to understand the imperfections, and you need to work around them, or you need to help them meet those help them mitigate those imperfections. Now, how do you do that? The process is governance. If you want to make outsourcing work, there are three words which are most important: governance, governance, and governance. Um, so bring in a process of governance. So what's governance at its at its most fundamental level? It is to bring all the issues into a forum, have a discussion, jot down all the decisions and actions taken in those discussions, and then repeat that process periodically. You have to build a governance at multiple levels. At a operating level, let's say, for example, service desk, managing a service desk performance, where your governance can be at a daily level, right? And then you also have to build a hierarchy of governance, because governance, uh, being a decision making forum, of course there are many decisions which go beyond a particular level. Let's say the help desk cannot take decisions in terms of bringing in a new technology, so there has to be a very systematic way of bubbling up the bigger and bigger decisions right up to the top. So my personal experience was that we had this system of governance very rigorously executed with each of our partners, and we had two strategic partners, and I made sure that I have apex level governance with each one of them every month. Given our dependence on outsourcing, where almost all of our application work and almost all of our infrastructure work was being done by these two partners, it was important for me at a CIO level to engage in monthly governance, to bring in the seriousness of the process of governance, and that is what kind of cascades down. So you design it bottoms up and you execute it top down. So if you are reviewing it on a monthly basis, you are making sure that a week before there's a review at the next level, and so on. And there is a continuous process of solving the operational issues, taking the decisions, bubbling up those decisions that keeps coming up. The second important part of making outsourcing work is a focus on KPIs. Okay, not just SLAs. SLAs are like SLAs many times tend to be dumb, and there's 10 different ways to game SLAs. But when I what I mean by KPIs is to, let's say, measure the trend in tickets, the open tickets, the turnaround time of different tickets, and then start identifying where are those weak spots in your entire outsourcing management, where interventions may be required at different levels. So I'll give you an example. Um, um, Over my monthly sessions, I kind of saw a trend of increasing number of tickets. The tickets went up something like 26,000 per month to slowly they kept rising up to 40,000 per month. And every time I asked the team, like, why are they going up? What are the root causes why they're going up? And I insisted on analysis, a granular level of analysis on those to identify the root causes which will reduce those tickets. I think once they crossed 40,000, I lost my patience and I said, listen, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and get in here. This is an unacceptable situation that you have like a almost 30-40% rise in tickets without really, like, some significant actions being taken. And I think that jolted and woke up everyone. And then we saw a trend of those coming down. So focus on KPIs, bring in the KPIs which are important for the business, not the availability, not the typical availability and uptime. Those are also important. But when things are going well, start focusing more and more on things which are important for business, right? The third important part of making outsourcing work is continuous improvement. You may start at whatever level. These relationships, I mean, the partner is not perfect. Your relationship will start like a marriage, that after 1 month of honeymoon, all kinds of jhagdas and battles start, and slowly you learn to live with each other. Okay, but you make sure that you live with each other. Now, through the process of governance, um, make sure that in every governance at whatever level you have some continuous improvement actions coming out, and as a senior leader, focus on what are the improvements we have done this month. And I can tell you, I really believe in this power of habit of making small little improvements. So let's say even if I'm able to make 3 to 5 improvements every month, okay, tangible ones which are giving results. Over a period of a year, you would have ended up in anything between 36 to 60 improvements of different types. And imagine if, let's say, at least 10% of them give you some major, benefits. 3 to 5 of them, not bad actually. Okay. So, yeah, it's a change in hands if you decide it to be so. It is a problem solver if you decide it to be so. But you cannot outsource your problems. You have to manage. You have to manage it. You have to put significant efforts in making outsourcing work. Okay, so I still do not see a question from my audience, but meanwhile, let me acknowledge them. So I have Hanish Tiwari from Accenture. Hey, hi Hanish. And I have Ritesh Mathur from Raurkela. Hi Ritesh. So let's then move on to some other questions also. Now this question is from Koundinya Deshik, senior business analyst. His question is: what are the typical processes every business must automate? Does business really need digital process automation or RPA to improve ROI? Okay, so that's a great question. I think typical. So let's understand where does automation work best. Okay, and then you got to, in your specific organization, in your specific context, you need to go back and search for those problems that you can solve with automation. So automation typically works when you have repetitive tasks without too much of without too many variations. Okay, so and which you need to conduct day on day. So let's start with IT itself. Before, why go beyond IT? When you can find opportunities there. So as you keep running your development processes, uh, you have certain scenarios you want to make sure that they are not breaking. Okay, so and whatever desired functionality is there, it works. So 90% of your testing is about making sure that whatever you had built till the last release, okay, is not breaking when you are bringing in changes. 10% of it is the release testing, which is anything new that you have built. Does it work as designed, as coded, or not? Okay. Now, for this 90% of what has already been built, every time you make a change, you have to test it. If you're not testing it, you are probably leaving out some benign risks out there. This ideal candidate for automation, testing automation. Okay. So long back, when I was running CRM, I really wanted to run very, very fast. We had such a backlog of requirements, and we were like, doing it for, whether it's dealer management, sales, service, spares, logistics, integrations. We had a ton of work at our hands, and every time, um, so we first tried to run fast, go do monthly releases, and we found that things are breaking, okay, and people are not able to manage that level of change. Eventually we came to and we also realized that hey, you can do 2 weeks of development and 2 weeks of testing. Now this is also a typical question of your productive time versus your setup time. So testing is a time where the developers have to like just sit idle. Of course, now things have changed quite a bit, so we'll come to that as well. So we eventually moved to a 3-month release cycle with about 2 weeks of testing. The good balance between productive time of developers versus the setup time or the validation time. And I was not happy with that. I wanted to run. My ideal target was to run a monthly release with only about 2 to 3 days of testing, because I didn't want to really lose out on that development capacity, which was sort of idle when you are doing the testing. Of course, it's not that idle, but yeah. Um, so um, I engaged a partner in for testing automation, and my target to them was very clear. I want to bring down this 2 weeks of testing to 2 days of testing, and I want to bring down my 3 months of release cycle to 1 month of release cycle. Rome was not built in a day. For the scale of application that we were running, it did not happen overnight. But as I said again, using a process of governance, every month making sure that you are walking a few steps. Sometimes you may not walk as fast as you have targeted, but as long as you're moving, I think we are good. Okay, so over a period of time, I would say it took us about 6 to 9 months to reach there. um, I actually also set out a very unrealistic target for everyone, which I realized later on it was unrealistic, was 100% automation testing. And after about 9 months to a year, we realized that, you know what, um, the current release testing should not be automated. And that's where we came to this 90-10 thing, right? So automation start with IT. Try out automation on your test cases, um, especially critical operations, critical processes. Start from there. Then bring in the same principle. Where is a repetition of work where I can bring in automation? So, like for example, in any let me take an example of manufacturing, and I'll take other examples as well. So in manufacturing, you will see that all your core value chain processes. So if you see your trucks bringing the raw material inside your plant, and then these raw material undergoing various processing activities, many of them being repetitive manufacturing, and then these trucks leaving your and then the finished goods leaving your plant in trucks. Each of these places you will have operations which are repetitive, mindless. Mindless in not in the sense that there has to be a lot of brains in designing that process so that it can run mindlessly. That means people, let's say a security guard can run, a vehicle outward process or a vehicle inward process. So that's the level of, I would say, uh, finesse in repetitive operations that we are talking about. So typical value chain processes, ideal candidates for automation. So you can actually think of automating. When your vendors send you the material, get that data over a portal, so that nobody has to feed that data at the gate. Okay, and then figure out those automation mechanisms to do a single click inwarding, and then take it there again, a single click inwarding, and just stitch around the whole process. Of course you have to manage some exceptions, but you know what, many a times we design our processes for exceptions which are happening 1 to 5% of the time. The first design principle has to be, I have to design a process with a significant amount of automation for managing 95% of my process scenarios. Okay, then I look at the exceptions, and I also have to look at the probability or the frequency of exceptions. The more frequent an exception happening, the more I should be looking at prioritizing that, either from an automation point of view, or in terms of a clerical review of that process. So while you design these processes, as long as the rules are met, the process is a pass through, automated pass through process. When some rule is not met, you park it for a review, and that's when a human being should be looking at that process, and should be managing that exception. But most times we lose out the intelligence in that management. So you also should build a feedback loop where the exceptions that which came, can they also feed back into your process, into your automation, to make that automation go more from, let's say, 95 to 96 to 97, and so on, right? So in case of service industries, again, if you see typical processes to be automated, let's say a multi-channel, customer facing things, like, for example, somebody sending an email or putting a complaint on your website, can you automate it? See, that's a core value chain for you, right? There it was manufacturing. Here it is, it's because you're in a service business, the customer is your primary value chain activities. So try to automate, anything that is customer facing and repetitive, to bring it into the mainstream process. Then on the back end, there are many reconciliation processes, matching, which people do manually or they do it on Excels. Those are again ideal candidates for automation. And in terms of RPA, now a lot of these automations have been handled within the respective ERPs and systems for a long time. So let's kind of try to decode, where does RPA come in. Okay, so RPA comes in where you are handling multiple systems. Okay, so like, for example, and where traditionally you have found that the cost of integration between systems at the back end is not really worth it, or it's not or there's just too much of variation in the process to manage. So let me give you a simple example. Okay, so and this also takes me back, into memory lane, where we were looking at these kind of things. People coming to our website and putting complaints. There used to be a manual process. Somebody in corporate communication will, download these once a day, and then they will distribute it, and there was no tracking mechanism. So typically when that is happening, the first thing is the to be process. The to be process should be that each of those things that are coming on your website should actually go and hit your customer service system or the CRM system and create a ticket, right? And this is something somebody will have to manually do, because there are all sorts of things that are coming on your website. But typically in an RPA kind of scenario, your RPA bot will run. It will basically take stuff from your website data. Then it will sort of open your CRM and it will create a ticket wherever it can create, based on the data and the intelligence in that intelligence within the bot. It will try to fill up that data automatically. Where not, it will become an exception. And over a period of continuous improvement, you try to minimize that manual review, right? So a typical use case, as I said, other use cases are reconciliations. Reconciliations is a very big use case for RPA, where you have to, really reconcile across tons and tons of data. I always, before I end my, monologue on this topic, um, I am a big believer of eat your own dog food. Eat your own dog food is, you will always find a use case for whatever you are talking about in your own department. So as an IT department, you will find those opportunities for learning and for POCing these things. So we were talking about reconciliation. So let's look at RPA opportunity in reconciliation. So we have a lot of these integrations which are running between different systems. A lot of these are batch integrations now, and so many a times you have issues coming out where some integration fails, or let's say doesn't run fully and all that. So think about, like, running your entire reconciliation, any kind of reconciliation you want in IT, to be running through an RPA. Go check this, match it. If there's a problem, like, send out an email or send out an SMS. Right? So these are simple things that you can do using an RPA. So learn it by doing it first within your own function, and then you will gain very, very first hand insights, where you will be able to correlate this with the rest of the functions, and make an impact there, right? Okay, so I suddenly see a flood of questions here. Um, okay, so let me go to my audience. This is your session, so I'll keep coming back to you frequently. So we have Partha Bhattacharya here. Good evening, Partha. Um, and you have a question here or a statement. Let me see what it is. So Partha is saying that JCB keeping up to date test cases in an automation environment like Selenium is essential to testing automation. Note that each change in UI UX will need changes to the test cases. About 70% automation is optimum in my experience. Yeah, Partha, when I was talking mostly at a code level. So that's where I was talking about 90/10. But yes, if you really include the entire gamut of testing that you need to do, I think maybe 70% or 80% is optimum. There is still some stuff that you need to manually review. Thanks for that note, Partha. And yes, there are tools like Selenium, which is an open source tool, you know, which can help you automate your test cases and create your test repositories. Uh, okay. Thanks, Partha. Now I have Hanish Tiwari. Hanish, you asked a question. First, you have two comments there, so let me take one by one. Okay. So, first question is, in a scenario where technology implementation to be done with outsourcing, what should be the approach to decide shift and then um, transform, or first do tech interventions and then move the processes? Hanish, this question is very important, but it is not very clear to me. So, if you want, we can discuss it live here. If you're okay to, if you're not shy enough, join me in the studio. Vinay, Sumit, can you guys send Hanish our StreamYard link, and then we can discuss it. Okay, so Hanish, so you have another question. Therefore, I'm trying to optimize it. Um, okay, so you have asked this question in a slightly better way. But yeah, feel free to join me. My team is sending you the link. What is the good approach? So check out your LinkedIn personal message. What is the good approach when technology implementation is to be done along with outsourcing, whether to lift shift process and then transform or vice versa? Hmm. Uh, I got your question. If you join, we'll discuss. Otherwise, I'll answer this question. Okay. But meanwhile, let me move on to the next question, which is from Utsav. Hey, Utsav, good to see you back. I think this is your second clarity chat, and I'm happy that you're finding value to come back again. So Utsav says, "Good evening, sir. In brief, what suggestion would you give to today's generation who are in IT that can help students to motivate to code?" Okay. I think Whitehead Junior is doing what you what you are what you are asking, Utsav, which is motivating them to code. So I think the basic thing is gamified. I have a 11-year-old niece, who has learned some Python programming, and all she does is, like, she just uses her creativity to create some games. Okay, so if you don't do this, this will die and all of that, and she just keeps busy doing that. So one of the best ways to get people to motivate people is to gamify the whole thing, um, or to ask them to develop games. So this reminds me, it's also a fundamental question on how do you get people to use technology more? How do you get people to how do you motivate people uh, to be in technology and all that, right? So um, so coming back to coming back to this incidents that I always find hilarious in terms of usage of technology was that I think they were some members of parliament or MLAs. I don't remember what it was. There was a training program going on to for them to use technology. Okay, and and they were really struggling with it. Okay, so it was basically sending emails, sending chats to each other, and all that. And they were really struggling with it. And then what happened? One of them actually sent a sarcasm or I think a cuss word at somebody else, and suddenly there was a buzz in the room, and these sarcasms and these jokes and these what you call as kataksh, right? They were flying around in the entire room, and within no time people learned how to use messaging. So we have to think about how to make things exciting, uh, and that's a big thing in today's technology world, how to gamify things, right? Now, what suggestion would I give to today's generation who are in IT? I would see. I would say that there's a lot you can do with code, but think about always think about long term. One of the most common problems I've seen with the young coders and the young generation uh, is that you're just trying to make it work somehow, right? That somehow is where the trouble starts because your code is not long lasting. If you come under that pressure and you are and you that chalta hai or like jugaad you do, eventually after some time, if what you're building works, then after some time you will find that those become technical debts for you, and they hurt you. So always take a long term view when you're building something, when you're coding something. Take a view that this code is going to be used. If this code has to be used 5 years later or 10 years later or 15 years later, and if this code has to outlast me, that means I hand over this code to somebody else, and people will keep building over it. Then anything that you're coding today, you're actually building a foundation. Okay. um, uh, so don't take shortcuts. Okay. I can narrate one incident. Again, my one of my favorite ones. So I mean, we built this CRM, and we were bringing these pair codes from SAP, and these pair codes had I think some three leading zeros to it. Okay. Now, typically, how it happens that you download data from your ERP, and that data has to be populated into your CRM, and this was being done through Excel. Okay, so it was coming to Excel and then going there. Now, when it was coming to Excel, the Excel was eating up the leading zeros. Okay, so what somebody did in the anxiety to make the whole thing work is that they added a small program which added three zeros to the pair code before it was loaded onto CRM. Okay. Now this worked very well for I don't know how many years, 4, 5, 6 years, and then you know uh, the business changed. It became more complex, more scaled up. We ran out of pair codes, and suddenly business started using alphanumeric pair codes. Okay, and suddenly, like things started falling like like playing cards, like a house of cards, and it was like we kept wondering what's going wrong, and then somebody did that entire audit of the process. First thing, what is failing? So it was basically pair codes were failing. The orders were not being placed because the pair codes were not matching. And then when you went down into pair codes, you figure out that hey, the pair code that is. Then you're looking at your log of that integration, and what it is showing you is, and believe me, it is not easy to read that log. Okay, you have to really read it line by line by line by line, and then somebody noticed after I think 2 3 days of troubleshooting that this pair code that is being passed on from CRM is like having like three zeros and then ABCD something, and then the investigation started, and we figured out that there's a small program lying somewhere which is adding three zeros to the pair code, which worked as long as the pair codes were numeric, but when they became alphanumeric, it started failing. So always build. Uh, there's a phrase called "build to last." Build something which lasts. Okay. So I hope that answers your question, Utsav. So let me move to Kapil. Hi, Kapil. You are not happy. You're asking me to answer your question from previous session: how to make impression on client as a senior resource from vendor. Great question. And not really very complex answer. See, how do you make an impression on someone? Couple of ways. One is, and you can actually play back. When somebody makes an impression on you, think about when somebody made an impression on you, and then decode that. What is it that they did when they made an impression on you? So typically, uh, one way to make an impression is to know about the person. Okay, know about the person, know about their business. Do your homework. I mean, that's the best way to build a connection with the client. I would rather change it from making impression on the client to, building a strong connection with the client, or portraying a strong connection with the client. I mean, one of my, coaches, we were discussing the same thing, like, how to make an impression on the client, how to woo the client. And we actually did a thought experiment. Okay. So I said, when is your next client meeting? Okay. And yeah, it was the next day. And I said, okay, who all are attending? So do you know who all are attending? Well, she didn't have much idea. She knew, but she hadn't really done much work on that. So I said, let's do it. Let's make it a working session. Um, and we started going into one by one the attendees who were there on the meeting invite, which had come from the client, and we started going to each of those um, people's LinkedIn profiles. Okay, so we knew the name and we knew the organization they belong to, so it was very easy to get to their LinkedIn profile, and then we started looking at what organizations they have worked in, and all of that, and then like a bit of discussion around where would they come from in a discussion on the particular technology. Where would they come from? Now, this was funny that this was a client who was into, I think, some I would say precious minerals kind of business, and they had a CFO who had worked in another sector. Okay, where the technology solution that they were selling had a huge number of use cases. And she said that, yeah, in that industry I have quite a few number of use cases. I said, listen, CFO is a key decision maker. Let's try this. Okay, so tomorrow when you are making the pitch, this guy is a CFO, was supposed to be the sponsor of that initiative. I'm correct, it was something related to RP or backend automation. And I think a few days later, she came back to me and she said it was like one of the best meetings she had, because one is that whoever was there in the meeting, she could actually contextualize and personalize her messaging to those people whenever they had a question, or when she was explaining something, she could actually explain it with their different points of view in a very targeted manner, not in a general manner. And second thing is that whenever these questions came around, around the problem that they were trying to solve, she was taking a telecom example, and and there was a good engagement with the CFO, because he understood telecom well. Okay, so Kapil, I hope this answers your question. Let me summarize what I just answered. Uh, don't think about making an impression, but think about it about making a connection with the customer. And how do you make a connection is when you go deeper into who the customer is, where are they coming from, what are the businesses they have worked in, and try to gather as much information about the person as well as about the business they are in. Okay, and then it really empowers you and enables you to contextualize or to personalize your message to their specific context. And that is what really impresses the customer, that boy, this guy has done his homework. Okay, so let me know if it answers your questions, Kapil, or if you have any follow-up question on this. Okay, so okay, so Hanish is in a Coorg resort. I really envy you, Hanish. I'm like sitting in Hotel Lalit in Mumbai, and I can, right in front of me, I can see rains coming in, and it's humid. It's not very bad weather, but it's humid. Yeah, but I've been to Coorg in monsoons, and it's fantastic. Okay, so let me pick up your question then and answer that. Okay, so your question was what is a good approach when technology implementation is to be done along with outsourcing, whether to lift shift processes and then transform, or vice versa. Um, see, the answer will be okay. The classical or the ideal answer to this question will be that first work on your process, okay, and then try to automate it, because if you automate an inefficient process, you're going to actually increase inefficiency in the system. Okay. So I have a favorite, this thing, which again in one of our clarity chats, we kind of got this epiphany, which was that, so you have this two-lane highway without much, without without the kind of controls and other things, and therefore to make sure that to have good traffic control, you have put speed breakers, right? Now you build a highway, a six-lane highway, but you do not remove the speed breakers. So where did you end up with? You probably will end up with more and more jams. Okay. So it is very important that as you're bringing in technology, as you're bringing in modernization to your processes, you have to streamline them, make them lean first. So they always say that first lean your process and then automate your process. Lean your process means cut out the flap from that process, cut out the approval chains from that process, cut out the multiple non-value adding controls from that process. Okay, and then you automate it. I also have another favorite one, which is bring in controls through information, data and information, rather than bring in controls through a chain of approvals. Okay, so you have to do your homework, in terms of leaning the processes first and then implementing it on technology. Otherwise, people are going to have inefficiency at a greater scale, and actually you're going to lose a lot of trust from your end users. Okay, so having said that, can you really do a carpet bombing across all your processes? No, you can't. So you have to really look at what are those core processes where this technology is going to make an impact. Identify the highest impact areas. Typically, when you're undertaking any kind of automation along with outsourcing, look at the transactions having the highest volumes, or look at the transactions having the highest number of users. And once you focus your attention on those, you are able to take away a lot of discontent or a lot of change management challenge that comes up when we are implementing a new technology. Okay, and then Then you continuously improvise. Then you keep going down and going down into the long tail, and keeping on leaning your rest of the processes. And by the time you also have built a certain amount of, I would say, a certain amount of um, credentials that this works, that you first lean the process and then you automate it, and then it gives results. So you would have enough repository of processes. If you try to do a carpet bombing, you would probably have a lot more ridicule. So focus on the core processes, maybe the top five processes, do it there, and then do the rest. So when you're doing the planning and blueprinting, make sure that you have, like, 5 plus 10 plus 20, like that. So put it in your blueprint so that you don't lose out on funding for those. You don't lose out on the credibility of the entire initiative itself. Are you going to do it only for five and all of that, right? Okay. So now I have one more question from Partha. I don't think it's a question, so let me read out first. JCB, in the supply chain, we use RPA to automate L1, L2 support of EDI monitoring process. Great one. EDI is, like, one of the most repetitive transactions, and that's why it is EDI. And you're monitoring EDI and doing an L1, L2 support. Great example, Partha. It can ensure that all EDI messages are received, read, and committed by the respective software tools, SAP, OpenText, Robocopy, etc. Again, like, a reconciliation process that we were talking about, right? If anything is stuck, it can take common corrective actions and send an alert to the user. Absolutely. Thanks for that value addition, Partha, to the discussion. And Kapil, thanks for completing the loop. Yes, it did answer, and I'm happy. Thank you for that acknowledgement. Okay, so let us see. We have run out of questions here. So, guys, if you have further questions, please feel free to ask. I do hope these questions are, the answers are making some sense to you. They all come from my experience. But, well, um, before I go forward and take my next question, I just wanted to tell you that I'm a mechanical engineer. I spent 7 years in business and then shifted to IT, and I learned IT. Most of the IT I've learned is firsthand, through my own experience, through a lot of mentoring from my friends and my colleagues, a lot from reverse mentoring, from the new generation of techies that keep coming in. And I think it has been very, very fun learning it firsthand, and then combining those with the principles with which we run the business, which is focus on processes, focus on efficiencies, focus on KPIs, focus on outcomes, and then create this nice mix of business oriented technology management. So and that's what I'm passing on to everyone here. Okay, so let's go to the next one from Jiten Chablani, which is, what is your opinion on personalization at work? How can IT help achieving it? Hmm. It's a good question, Jiten. I mean, unfortunately, I'm a little weak on the specific tools and technologies, so I can only uh, I can tell you, like, a bit of dated information, which is, like, do you have a strong user repository? Before you talk of personalization, do you have the data around personalization? Okay, so here is the test for you. Okay, go to your Outlook and look at, just click on any of the contacts in your Outlook, and the Outlook contact. If you look at Outlook contacts, the card has many tabs in it, which is around, like, for example, your basic info, what groups you're part of, like, etc., etc., etc. So there's quite a bit of information that you capture against a user. Okay, I can tell you that, mm, I mean, many organizations, I should not say most, but many organizations, they do not have this information fully updated in updated and sort of synchronized frequently between their HR system and their Outlook address book. Okay, so again, I tend to go back to basics. For me, the basics of personalization is the availability of data in your core system, which is your identity system, which allows you to personalize. So do you have the location of your people? Is that location updated when people get transferred? Do you have the function that they are in? Do you have the department that they are in? Generally, hierarchy information is something that is always updated. But beyond hierarchy, I haven't seen a lot of these attributes updated. Once you have these attributes in your identity system updated, you know that is when you start leveraging it. So like for example, there's a location specific alert, right, that you want to send out for network outages. Instead of sending out to thousands of your users, you can actually filter out. You can easily send a message to all people in that particular location. If you have the office information updated, you can actually send office specific updates to those. Many a times, instead of doing it you know doing it on a case to case basis, it allows you to have a fairly comprehensive and a granular level of distribution lists. Okay, so you can use those distribution lists to to personalize your messages. So, personalization at work is again part of eating your own dog food. Okay, when we are talking of context, being context sensitive and being and driving personalization with your customers, how can you do that if you're not doing it for your own users? And then you go back to how do I do it for my own users? Is by having a very very strong data quality and completeness, accuracy, recency of updates in your identity system, and leverage that. And that also means that you need to get these updates from your HR system and any other systems, if there are. Like for example, if you're mapping your employees to different facilities, so that address should get updated from there. So it requires quite a bit of managing internal data and managing multiple internal systems to update your identity data of your users, primarily in your AD, and then leverage that information uh, to drive your personalization, whether it's applications or whether it's emails or whether it's your, let's say, alerts or anything, right? Okay. So we are at 5:58. I've really missed the 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 other panels that came after that startup panel in my alumni meet, which is going on in this hotel here. So I also have to run. So let me take a last question, which is coming from Parthasarathy. Uh, hey Partha, good evening, Mr. Jug. What's your view on BC for process management? BC is a success in transaction management. Okay. Okay. Thanks for explaining explaining the BC that is blockchain. Okay. Uh, so, Partha, and thanks for giving me this nice name called Mr. Jack. Well, just to let you know, many of my friends call me Jags, but I really like Mr. Jack. So, blockchain, see, blockchain, what is the fundamental of blockchain? Blockchain fundamental is that there are multiple parties who are validating a particular transaction. Okay, and therefore, in any process where there are multiplicity of stakeholders who get affected, who have an interest in tracking the process, should be part of that process, should be validating it. So it is always supposed to be supposed to be a sort of ecosystem game, and therefore there are generally you will find that such initiatives are run by consortiums. They are not run by an individual organization. They are run by consortium. So For example, when I was in G Transportation, we became part of consortium called Vita, which is blockchain in, I think, transportation and something. Uh, so there was a Beta Alliance, and which is, how do you bring in people like, the ports and the shippers, the logistics providers, the railroads, ports, and everyone. How do you bring them on to a common system and have very very trackable and traceable transactions. I think it's still a little, I would say, away from finding traction, because the world happens to be like, very organization by organization driven. It is finding some traction in international finance, where multiple parties have to validate and track a transaction to avoid frauds like that happened in the Bank of Baroda and stuff like that, right? So um, I think that's where I have seen a consortium of banks working on it. Uh, so it is still an evolving technology. We have to track it. We also have to connect with the startups who are innovating in these areas. And I think the biggest issue that I see here is the maturity and adoption, because uh, it's not adoption by one organization, but you're talking of a challenge of adoption across multiple organizations, right? So that's my limited take on blockchain in for process management, right? Partha is again saying that process is every maturing where transactions are kind of static. That's the context. So that's a very interesting one, Partha. I think last time you were with me on live on the chat, and I'm kind of realizing that you are looking at things at a level of abstraction which is not very easy for others to understand. So I understand what you're saying. It is basically, what you're saying is that, can I develop some sort of an evolving metadata of a process using blockchain by kind of writing all my process performances? Yes, you can. But as I said, again, this is an evolving area, and you need to really watch out and see how it. How things become practical. There's a lot of theory out there, a lot of concepts are being floated, but we have to really wait for the practical solutions, right? Okay, so we still have many questions unanswered, so that are in our backlog. Always there for a rainy day. When I'm doing a clarity chat and I don't have a nice audience like you who are engaging, I can actually go on a monologue answering those questions. But yeah, love the interaction, love your questions, and I really love these AMA sessions where I can talk more because in my guest interactions, I'm listening as much as you are listening, apart from asking questions and summarizing. So I really love these sessions, and thanks for the interactions. Thanks for the great questions. And thanks also to all the people who are watching the recording. So, to all of you, please enjoy your family time, enjoy your weekend. I will rush back to the ballroom where I'm sure some more interactions are going on. I'm really keen to meet those startup founders from my college. And yes, we will be back on next Saturday, that is 9th July. I'm back in action fully, so I'm sure I'll bring you some. Definitely my guest next time. I'll have enough time to do a prep chat with him. Till then, goodbye and have a good weekend.